restaurant and I saw your husband going down the street with the lady.
What then?
Why make so bold to suppose if it was Miss Lynn? Just arrived in town, eh?
Yes,
she's a great friend of yours, isn't she? I knew her once upon a time. So you know all about that, eh? I don't as much. Then can I ask you without beating about the bush? Is Miss Lynn to have an appointment in the bank?
What right of you to question me, Mr. Krogstad? You, one of my husband's subordinates. But since you ask, I shall tell you, Mrs. Lynn is to have an appointment in the bank, and it was I who pleaded the cause. Let me tell you that.
I was right in what I thought there.
You see, one has a tiny little bit of influence, especially when one is a woman. That doesn't necessarily follow that when anyone is in a subordinate position, they must be careful not to offend anyone who
have influence?
Exactly.
Miss Selma, you'll be so good as to use your influence on my behalf.
What do you mean?
You'll be so kind as to see that I'm allowed to keep my subordinate position at the bank.
What do you mean? Who proposed to take your post away
there's
from
no
me?
necessity to keep up with matters of pretense of ignorance. Eh? I can quite understand that your friend is so anxious to expose herself to chances of grabbing shoulders with me. And I quite understand him to thank for being turned down.
But I assure you.
Very, very, very well. But to come to the point and time has come when I should advise you to use your influence to prevent that.
But Mr. Krogstad, I have no influence.
Haven't you? I thought you just say now that you have influence.
Naturally, I didn't need to put construction on it. What makes you think I have influence of that guy with my husband?
I've known your husband from our student days, and I don't think he's any more unsaleable than other husbands.
If you speak slightingly of my husband, I shall turn you out of the house.
You're bored.
I am not afraid of you any longer. As soon as the near comes, I shall in a short time be through of the whole thing.
Listen to me, Miss Selma. If necessary, I'm prepared to fight for my small post in the bank as if I'm fighting for my own life.
Silence.
It is not only for the sake of money. Indeed, that weighs least with me in the matter. There's another reason as well. I must well tell you that my position is this. I think that once many years ago, I was guilty of indiscretion.
I think I've heard something of that kind.
The matter never came into the court. But everyone seemed to have been close to me afterwards. I took a business of. And I had to cut myself free from all that. I don't think I've been among the worst. My sons are growing. And for their sake, I must try and win as much respect as I possibly could in town. The small post in the bank was like my first step. But now, your husband is going to kick me downstairs into the murder cave.
You must believe me, Mr. Krogstad. I have no power to help you at all.
Then it's because you haven't will, but have things compelling.
You told me not to tell my husband that I owe you money.
Suppose I were to tell you.
That would be perfectly infamous of you. For him to learn my secret, which has been my joy and pride, in such an ugly and clumsy way, it will put me in a horribly disagreeable position.
Only disagreeable?
Okay, do it then, and it will be the worst for you. My husband will see what a blackguard you are, and then you would keep your post then.
Miss Selma, I asked you if it was only a disagreeable sin at home that you're afraid of.
Of course, my husband will pay what he's still owing, and then he'll have nothing more to do with you.
Listen to me, Miss Selma. Either you have a bad memory or very, very little you know of business, but I shall be obliged to remind you of a few things.
What do you mean?
When your husband was ill, you came to me to borrow 250 pounds.
Yes, I did not know.
And I promised to get you that amount on certain conditions.
Yes, and
I promised to get you that amount on certain conditions, but your mind was so taken up by your husband's illness that you were so anxious on how to get the money for the child that you seem to have paid no attention to a bargain. Therefore, it will not be amiss if I remind you of them. I gave you the money with the security that I have.
Yes, and which I signed.
Good. Below your signature, there were some lines constituting your father for the assurity of the money. Your father should have signed them.
Sure, he did sign them.
I had left the date blank. That's to say that your father himself should have inserted the date on which he signed the papers. Do you remember that?
Yes, I think I remember.
And I gave you the bond to send by post to your father. Isn't that so?
Yes. Well,
And you naturally did so because 4 or 5 days later you brought me the bond with your father's signature and I gave you the money.
Well, having that...
Fairly so, but to come to the matter at hand, it must have been a very trying time for you, Miss Selma.
It was.
Your father was very ill
He was near.
and died soon afterwards.
Yes.
Can you by any chance remember the day your father died? The day of the month, I mean?
Papa died on the 29th of September.
That's correct. I have a certain date for myself, and as to that, there is a discrepancy that I cannot account for.
What discrepancy? I don't
The
know.
discrepancy consists, Miss Selma, in the fact that your father dated his signature 3 days after his death. Your father died on the 29th of September. But he has dated his signature on the 2nd of October. Isn't this a discrepancy? Or can you explain it to me? It's a remarkable thing too that the word 2nd of October as well as the year was not written by your father's handwriting, but by someone's handwriting I think I know of. Well, it can be explained that someone might have dated it fatherly before knowing the death of your father. The signature is of the name, that's it. But let me ask you, is it your father who himself dated this signature, yeah?
No, it was I wrote Papa's name.
Are you aware that's a dangerous confession?
In what way shall get your money soon?
Miss Selma, let me ask you, why didn't you send the papers to father?
Papa was so ill. If I had to ask him for his signature, I would have to explain what the man was to be used for. I could not tell him that my husband was in a dangerous condition.
It would have been better for you if you had given up your trip abroad.
It was impossible. That trip was to save my husband's life. I could not give that up.
But it did never occur to you that you're committing a fraud on me?
I did not trouble myself about you at all. You put so many endless difficulties in my way, yet you knew what a dangerous position my husband was in.
Miss Selma, you evidently do not realize what is it that you're guilty of, But I can assure you that the first false step that lost all my reputation was nothing worse than what you've done.
Do you mean that you could run a risk to save your wife's life?
The law cares nothing about motive.
Then it must be a very foolish law.
Foolish or not foolish, It is the law by which you will be charged before you produce this paper.
Is that, can't believe it. Is that daughter not allowed to spare dying father against anxiety? Is the wife not allowed to save her husband's life? And none of them certain laws permitting this and that. But you are allowed, Mr. Krogstad. You must be a very poor law.
Maybe, But matters of business. Such business that you and I have held together. Do you think I don't remember that? Well, do as you please. But if I lose my position for the second time, you shall lose yours with me.
Nonsense.